So if Venti was obviously faking being in danger here, then I think it's safe to say that Venti in Genshin has been lying to us about him the entire time. And with 5.6 now, it's undeniable. We've known Venti since the beginning of this game. We've always known him to be a very laid-back, funny, upbeat, easygoing Archon that likes to drink, sing songs, and constantly known to be lazy and weak. But this Archon quest demonstrated that not only can Venti take things very seriously if the situation warrants it, but we actually got to witness him demonstrate a fraction of his power, as well as his abilities. And of course the cherry on top. Now obviously one of the biggest lore drops we got in 5.6 is them revealing to us not only the Shade of Life, their name, but what actually happened to them. The Shade of Life was eaten or absorbed by Rhindaughter, the Alchemist Gold, one of the 5 sinners and one of the Hexen Circle witches. And I cannot believe how subtly they dropped this on us, because this alone has so many implications, so many in fact that it hurts my brain, because this opens the door to so many possibilities when talking about Nibelung, the other shades, other angels from Celestia, the Moon Sisters, potential explanations to our sibling, the Traveler, who is considered a native to Teyvat by Irminsul now. I mean, there's just so many possibilities you can make of this, and I think Venti's connection with Istaroth is one of them, which is obviously going to be the topic for this video, but I do want to talk further about Rhindaughter and all these possibilities in another video. I just need more time to process it, because they left out so many questions like why Rhindaughter would absorb the Shade of Life. The only detail that we really know is how she absorbed the Shade of Life, which we'll talk about later in the video. Was the Shade of Life being punished? Were they already basically dead or in stasis before this happened? Did the same thing happen to Nibelung? Did somebody absorb them too? You can see just how many questions now and how many theories can spawn from just this little bit of information from Albedo he gave us. And again, I'm going to talk about all that in other videos, but let's focus on Venti right now, because he is an important character that we've known since the beginning of this game. But, like I've talked before in other videos about his past, because if you piece together Istaroth's history and what we know about this angel, and Venti, the little wind spirit that would become the animal Archon, there's a few things that just don't quite add up and don't make any sense. Obviously, we know that Istaroth was one of the 4 shades under the primordial one in the original humans, governed by Celestia, after they defeated the dragons and Nibelung. But we know that there was a growing resentment eventually between the original humans and the primordial one with their rules and their laws. The angels, along with the 4 shades, created to guide humanity. But when the War of Vengeance took place between the primordial one, the Dragon King Nibelung returning, and this mysterious second descender, the second who came, now known as the mysterious Voyager from beyond the stars, much of Celestia and humanity was eradicated, with Enkanomiya sinking to the watery abyss, the people crying for help, with Istaroth, the Shade of Time, the only angel to not forsaken them. Istaroth being worshipped in Enkanomiya for some time, as well as Inazuma and then later Mondstadt, which is why you can see her statue in both places. Istaroth even back then going by many names, such as the God of Moments, the Thousand Winds, or the Undying Wind. But what I find most peculiar about Istaroth is that even though she was heavily worshipped in Mondstadt specifically, knowledge of her existence has been all but forgotten in Teyvat almost everywhere except for Enkanomiya, where all of this forbidden knowledge and secrets are preserved, Enkanomiya being kinda isolated outside the governance of Teyvat now. Just little snippets and breadcrumbs of Istaroth linger in Teyvat, subtly preserved through phrases related to wind and time. Now, before we talk about Barbados, it's important to note that most of the angels in Celestia were banished after the War of Vengeance, with divine punishment, in constant fear of upsetting the heavenly principles. That's something we even learned in Natlan with the ruler and Shade of Death, Ranova, created to serve and guide humanity in the specific way that the primordial one wanted humanity to behave and to be, not to question anything, tried to break outside the mold that is Teyvat within this bubble world. So it's hard to specifically say exactly how Istaroth fits in here. Would they have been in trouble for helping Enkanomiya, assisting the original humans? The next phase of the Heavenly Principles and their new world order for Teyvat would be the Archon War, giving the 7 victors a fraction of the 3rd Descender and their remains, and then in turn having 7 Archons rule in Celestia's name, granting visions to those humans that are worthy to uphold Teyvat and its current status quo, learn from the mistakes of the original humans, the old world under Celestia and the primordial one. And the Archon War did just that, and every single nation simultaneously, gods, ancient beings, and powerful deities would go to war and fight for a divine seat at Celestia as one of the 7. Mondstadt being a very different and desolate place, plagued by harsh colds and winter weather, with a powerful god of storms, Dikarabane, ruling in tyranny, which resulted in the Gunhildr clan abandoning Old Mondstadt, now known as Storm Terror's lair. This is where a mysterious wind spirit known as Barbados would emerge, and the Gunhildr clan started worshipping Barbados, and this is how he began to amass power. Before he gained power though, Barbados was known as the single thread of 1,000 winds that roared through the northern lands, an elemental spirit without any divine power, and Istaroth herself, known to be the 1,000 winds. And yet, the game has never outright told us there's any direct correlation between these two. The wind spirit Barbados making a close bond and relationship with a bard from Old Mondstadt that would eventually fall in the battle in the rebellion against the tyrannical god, the wind spirit Barbados then taking on the shape and form of his fallen bard friend, which is how we see him today. And from here on out, Barbados would be the Anemo Archon, and still is the Anemo Archon to this day, having such strong immense Anemo power to be able to terraform the entire region of Mondstadt, blowing away all the winter weather and the snow, turning it into the lush open fields that we see today, even completely burying a snowy mountain now known as Musk Reef, aiding Vanessa in the rebellion of Mondstadt against the rich nobles. But what I find mysterious is that Venti was never contested as the Anemo Archon, unlike all of the other Archons we've met or heard about throughout the years, like Zhongli, who was absolutely bodying other Archons left and right to claim the Geo seat at Celestia. And that is pretty much all we know about these two in their history, because Barbados has been the Archon to this day, and Istaroth herself eventually disappeared and then eventually faded even in memory. Nobody really remembering her or worshipping her in Mondstadt, which is also obviously very strange. Now, what connections can we make between Istaroth and Barbados? Well, for starters, Venti is much more powerful than he's ever told us, or the game likes to tell us. We've been told he's the weakest Archon, which we know for a fact now that's not true. The fact that he was able to terraform Mondstadt the way he did multiple times, Musk Reef, even the Golden Apple Archipelago, remained uncontested in the Archon War for the remaining duration, even though it continued. A little tiny wind spirit with no significant power, becoming one of the most powerful people in Teyvat. Little suspicious. Venti's cryptic lines throughout the years in different trailers, hinting towards his power over time.
Ah, Traveler, we meet again. What? You don't remember me? Well, allow me to join you on your quest once again. I must see to it that the bards of the world tell the traveler's tales.
Not to mention, Istaroth was referred to as the 1,000 Winds, or the Undying Wind, even in Enconomia before Barbados existed as an Archon, even before the Archon War even started. And wind and time go hand in hand, both of which are always free-flowing and ever-changing. This new Archon quest even went to lengths to tell us that Barbados can even hear everything that goes on. Barbados is way more serious and involved than we've ever realized in Mondstadt. Barbados has just become so good at hiding his true strength and abilities. An expert at making himself appear weak, fragile, and harmless. Just this drunken bard that nobody takes too seriously. Even the people like Paimon and us that know his true identity don't know the full extent. They drop their guard and feel comfortable around him because he seems so easygoing and harmless. But something that we've never known until 5.6 is that an individual can fuse or absorb a shade. And that is exactly what I think happened here. I think Barbados was able to consume or absorb Istaroth, the god of time, in the same way that Rhindaughter was able to absorb Naberius, the Shade of Life. I think I have a very strong idea what actually happened and what went down, but what they do tell us is that after the Cataclysm, the heart of the Shade of Life was eventually discovered by Albedo and his master, Rhindaughter, very deep within a dungeon. Shortly after discovering it, Rhindaughter disappeared, leaving behind a message for Albedo to uncover the truth and meaning of this world. And then sometime after this, Rhindaughter would devour the heart of the Shade of Life, fusing with Naberius. And the way Albedo describes it is exactly how we've all been trying to describe Venti and Istaroth for so long. We've just never had enough evidence to put this together, because it feels like Venti is Venti but also is the god of time, but isn't quite Istaroth, because Istaroth is their own person and entity. But something was obviously connected, we could just never connect the dots completely. Is Venti Istaroth's child? Creation? Legacy? Did they fuse? Did Venti inherit those powers? For years we've had these questions, but I think this sort of answers it. It has to. The Angel of Time still exists, but in the same way that the Shade of Life does, through Barbados. The only difference being Rhindaughter actually discovered what sounds like the remains of the Shade of Life, almost like they were imprisoned underground in a dungeon or something bad happened. Maybe they died, maybe divine punishment, maybe they were in a stasis somehow, whereas Istaroth herself was always associated with the wind, known as the Thousand Winds, and the little wind spirit that would become Barbados, known as a thread of the Thousand Winds. To me at least, it sounds like after the Primordial One or the Heavenly Principles decided on the New World Order, the Seven Archons, the Archon War, the old humans now eradicated, the angels of Celestia banished now as Seelies, to live as empty husks of what they once were, the Four Shades now in Teyvat, sort of in hiding almost. Istaroth created these wind spirits, and then took the most exceptional one, now worshipped by the Gunhildr clan gaining power, as the new beacon and hope for Mondstadt and Teyvat, because Teyvat and its humans will always need the guidance of angels. And a perfect way for Istaroth to do this while remaining low-key and inconspicuous is to allow this little exceptional wind spirit of the Thousand Winds to absorb her in the same way Rhindaughter did with Naberius, to give Barbados the power to become the first and only ever Animal Archon, representing both time and wind, as the future of Mondstadt. And then henceforth, Istaroth herself faded through memory, almost like somebody's using the power of time to help the people forget about Istaroth's existence, keeping that a secret. And then moving forward, Barbados carrying the burden of Animal Archon and the God of Time. But again, we still lack a ton of context on this, through what Albedo told us. Does Rhindaughter have the full extent of the Shade of Life's power? A fraction of it? We know that even after Durin the Dragon was killed by Dvalin, his beating heart still remained on Dragonspine for years, until Albedo used it as part of his ritual to gift Mini Durin life. Was Naberius' heart still beating when Rhindaughter found it? Still alive? This is the only part of the video I don't have a true explanation for, because it's hard to gauge exactly how much of Istaroth's power Venti would have inherited, if he inherited Istaroth in a similar way to Rhindaughter inheriting the Shade of Life's power. We know that Venti took the shape of a nameless bard, one that he befriended as a little wind spirit before the rebellion of Old Mondstadt. It's stated in the game that the first act of the new Animal Archon, that was now Venti, the very first use of his powers was to take the image and shape of this friendly bard. And I can't prove that there's any correlation here with Istaroth, but when you look at all the statues of Istaroth, it does bear an uncanny resemblance. And again, I wasn't even going to include this part in the video because I don't have any concrete evidence, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. Could Istaroth have had something to do with this nameless bard, befriending this little wind spirit and then becoming the Animal Archon, taking its shape and form? Like I've talked about in many videos talking about the shades, in a lot of cases, most of the shades help cultivate each region and play a part with the Archon War, but we obviously know that the Shade of Death made a deal with the first Pyro Archon, establishing the rules of Natlan, humans becoming Archons. the Shade of Life actually created the first Hydro Archon, Egeria, point blank, no theories needed. And I also speculate the Shade of Life to have played a big part with Nabu, the goddess of flowers, who was a very pivotal and important character in Sumeru with the 3 god kings. Istaroth also helped with Inazuma establishing the sacred Sakura, aiding Raiden Makoto even after the Cataclysm. And I already have my theories on Zhongli and his potential mysterious origins. If you want to check that out, I already have a video. I don't want to bloat this one out longer than it needs to be, but the point is, the 4 shades of Faunus, the primordial one, have been playing a big part, interfering with the Heavenly Principles' establishment of the New World Order, the Archon War, and hence the 7 Archons. And when I make my video talking about Rhine-Daughter and the Shade of Life, I'm even going to explore the avenue that the Shade of Life was punished more severely than the other shades, maybe for even potentially creating an Archon and interfering, because we know Egeria herself was punished by the Heavenly Principles for giving the Oceanids of Fontaine humanity, if you recall, in 4.2. The Great Flood, the prophecy. Egeria essentially doing the exact same thing as her creator, the Shade of Life. Again, that'll be a topic for its own video, but there's a ton of evidence to suggest that the Archons were all cultivated by the Shades. And I really see Barbados being no different. I just thought it was worth pointing out that this bard that Venti took the form of resembles Istaroth in a lot of ways, because we don't know exactly how Istaroth looks, but we have a good idea, because the resemblance is very uncanny. And like we already talked about, Venti's entire story becoming an Archon and what follows is very peculiar, gaining all of this power as a powerless wind spirit, everybody forgetting about Istaroth, meeting a mysterious bard that befriends you, that looks like Istaroth. But overall, I truly think this fills in the missing puzzle pieces to Venti's backstory, and why for so many years he's had so many connections to time, but we can't quite place it. A random wind spirit gaining that much power, becoming an Archon, and remaining uncontested to this day, while even somebody as powerful and feared as Zhongli still had to slay many gods to inherit his Archon position. And I truly think Venti has been able to manipulate time and wind all of these years to keep himself elusive, underrated, underdetected, look after Mondstadt and even other nations, because we know that Venti actually ventured out between all of the nations, trying to help heal people from corruption, like he did with Zhao, but all this time he's been around, listening, ready to aid the people, but also allow them to live freely, much like the angels eventually wanted for Teyvat, along with this mysterious voyager, who ultimately came back to aid Nibelung in his rebellion to save Teyvat from the tyranny, the false world that is Teyvat, and their very strict heavenly principles. At the very least, we can confirm that Venti's a total faker. He's never in true danger. We caught him red-handed this time, but I'm curious to know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know. I do plan on making a Hexen Circle full video, and I also want to talk more about Rhine-Daughter. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, and as always, we will see you all in the next one. Later.